All right, all right. Good morning. I feel like I was Matthew McConaughey there. Good morning, everybody.
Why Matthew
Welcome to the
McConaughey?
because he says all right all the time,
Gotcha.
and I said all right. And I went, oh wait, I got to stop that because that's very Matthew McConaughey. Uh, you are tuned into the Ted Manila Information Show, TMI for short, where we'll bring you way too much information. I am Manila Chan. That's Ted Rall. We cover anything from news, politics, lifestyle, culture, social media, diets. Ooh, I hope we can get to this diet section because I have a great video from RFK Jr., the would-be incoming HHS secretary, um, talking about the American food system, our diet. So I'd like to get down to that. We're going to talk about it. If you're looking for a straight-laced, button-down news program, this show is not for you. We're going to give you a warning right now. You might want to turn the volume down if you're at work because some F-bombs occasionally fly, some other curse words, so it's not really safe for work. So if you are easily offended, this is not the program for you. We talk about stuff you want to hear about, and then some stuff you didn't know that you wanted to hear about. And then when you learn about it, you're like, oh, I'm glad Ted and Manila told me. We are live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, so be sure to like and follow this show. And of course, we would appreciate any kind of support, whether it's financial or just simply following the show. If you're watching it and not following, do us a favor and hit the like and the follow button. Become a subscriber on YouTube. That is free. And the term subscribe on Rumble is different. That is where if you are on the desktop version, you can go into the chat, and at the bottom of the chat, you can hit the subscribe button and you can become a monthly supporter for just $5 a month. A month. That's less than your tall caramel macchiato, blah, 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 gooey, gunky stuff that you buy at Starbucks per day. You can't even buy it that a tall per day. Just saying. I don't know. I don't go to Starbucks, Ted, so I think that's
Really?
about
No
right.
Starbucks for you? Why not?
I like my own coffee better.
Me too.
And also, the CEO of Starbucks is a major Zionist.
All right. Zionist, no
So,
Zionist coffee for you.
yeah, I don't do Zionist coffee. So I've made that a rule for a very, very, very long time. So
Interesting.
yeah, so I don't go to Starbucks.
I only go
I
there
can
when I need a
avoid it.
place to when I'm traveling and I need a place to work. It's my
Yeah.
home office away from home.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Only if there's like no choice or people are like bringing Starbucks and they're like, here's a Starbucks. I personally try not to patronize if I can, but I'll probably get in trouble for, BDSing Starbucks. So whatever. Like, I don't know. I feel like YouTube is going to come down on me for like, oh, you don't go to Starbucks? Like they're a top advertiser on, probably true.
Could be.
Probably true.
I don't know.
All right. You are watching the TMI Show. It starts now, Jaws.
All right, let's get to it. President Joe Biden has authorized Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied long-range weapons to conduct strikes on Russian territory. Just a few days have passed, and now Ukraine has used long-range ATACMS missiles against a target inside Russia for the first time. That, according to a Ukrainian news agency, RBC Ukraine. The missiles, which have a range of 190 miles, hit a munitions storage facility near the city of Karachev in Bryansk Oblast in western Russia. That's about 70 miles away from the Ukrainian border. This happened on November 19th. Indeed, this is the first time that ATACMS has been used to strike Russian territory. The strike was carried out on a facility in the Bryansk region, and it was successfully destroyed. An unknown anonymous source told the outlet. The target was Russia's 67th arsenal of the Russian Main Missile and Artillery Directorate, which may have been hit in a combined drone missile attack. Local residents captured video of the explosions. OSIN Technical, a military analyst on X, formerly Twitter, included one in a post which said earlier this morning, a large explosion tore through Russia's 67th GRAU arsenal, a critical ammunition storage facility in Bryansk Oblast, sending a fireball soaring hundreds of feet in the air. Ukrainian attack drones had been spotted in the area. Now, I want to be clear in all the coverage here, Manila, about this story. There's something missing, and I think it's pretty pertinent to why it's controversial and why Russians might take a even dimmer view of this particular attack than previous attacks, which is namely that the Ukrainians don't know how to guide ATACMS missiles. So they're guided by American military personnel. So quite reasonably, Russia thinks, well, when an ATACMS hits us, that's not really Ukraine firing a weapon at us. That's really the U.S. And what's the word that they're not? Oh, right, wrong. That's the word that they're not.
Yeah, well, Ted, we covered it yesterday that Vladimir Putin has already said that he would take this as a strike, not a personal attack, obviously. Maybe kind of a personal attack. But
probably not that personal.
But not that personal. We're just doing war here. It's not personal, But I think what he said is right, that he would view this as the U.S. becoming a direct belligerent in the war. I mean, versus it's one thing to just supply, which to me, there's really no difference. A proxy war you're a belligerent in my opinion. You either are or you aren't. It's like you can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are or you aren't. And I think the U.S. has been a belligerent in this war from the onset, and including provoking it.
That's true.
So what kind of measured approach we're going to see, and I can almost assure you that it will be a measured approach, but my problem is with our administration and Joe Biden's outgoing administration trying to not only muck it up for the incoming administration, but literally I feel like there's a part of that they're doing this because they hate the idea of Trump coming in so bad that they would rather risk and wager World War III than to have Trump come into power. Maybe just a little bit, I feel like.
Well, it's a major asshole move, right? I mean, the thing is, it's undermining the administration, the foreign policy on a very important issue of the incoming administration, which, frankly, in my opinion, is in this particular matter a superior foreign policy than the one that's currently in place. But I guess that's neither here nor there. But look, for people who are like, oh, Manila might be exaggerating. Look, it does risk World War III because Russia has changed its nuclear protocol to say that any attack on Russian territory by a nuclear-armed power is even if that attack takes place using conventional means, which ATACMS are conventional weapons, which is to say non-nuclear, is considered an attack by a nuclear power, and it authorizes the president of the Russian Federation to launch a nuclear attack against that belligerent and or its allies. So this is, according to Russian policy now, and the U.S. knows this, it is completely possible, that right now as we speak, Putin is entering the launch codes to fire nuclear, ICBMs at New York and Washington. I mean, and that would not be something that we weren't warned about. That is a risk that the U.S. and Biden took when they made this order. Now, I don't think that's going to happen.
We're not saying that, right, to be clear, we're not saying that he is doing that.
But it is theoretically possible according to Russian policy and their internal rules, right? Like this would be true even if Putin dropped dead and there's a new president. This would still be the policy. It's not like Putin's thing. It's not his personal person. This is like Russian. I mean, the policy can be changed. It was changed before, but this is where we stand now. And Biden's like, rock and roll. What could go wrong?
Let's give him an early Christmas present. Let's give son, you've been asking for these for a long, long time. And, I'm not going to be POTUS for much longer. I think that's how he's talking to Zelensky. He's like, all right, son. All right. You've been a good boy. Little Vlad. You've been a good boy. You know what? For Christmas this year, how about 6 ATACMS?
Yeah, well, and the Americans to guide them. I mean, that part is always left out. And I think if most people who don't really have a strong opinion about this war were to read that and say, wait, the U.S. troops wearing American military uniforms are firing at Russia, that should give you not pause. That should absolutely terrify you.
Yeah, this is a serious escalation, I would say, because it does make the US, if we weren't already complicit, Ted, this is definitely being complicit because the US is guiding them. Because remember, the Ukrainians,
It's beyond complicit.
not only are they low manpower, right? But remember when they were asking for like F-16s and we're like, our guys can learn to fly them in like 3 minutes. Don't worry, they'll just throw them in the cockpit. Give us some F-16s.
Yeah.
Same. I think the same thing is happening here. They're like, give us the ATACMs. Well, we'll figure it out. Don't worry. And the US, saw that they weren't doing so great in flight training. So they're like, okay, we'll give them to you, but we'll put the training wheels on. We'll guide you, son, on how to use them. So this is a major escalation. And I think this is a terrible, terrible thing that the Biden administration is doing on the way freaking out. They would rather risk World War III than hand over the keys to the White House to Donald Trump.
Well, they're going to hand the keys over whether they like it or not. Well, speaking of which, President-elect Trump confirmed that he will declare a national emergency to carry out his campaign promise of mass deportations of migrants living in the U.S. without legal status. Of course, we talked about this here on the TMI show yesterday, and we had a good discussion. Seems like this seems to be a worst case scenario. Following up that discussion, Trump pledged to get started on mass deportations on day one. He said, on day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out, he said during a rally at Madison Square Garden back in the closing days of the presidential race. I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered, and we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail, then kick them the hell out of our country as fast as possible. Well, looks like he's on his way to doing that. Already, he's tapped several immigration hardliners to serve in key cabinet posts. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem was in between dog killing to be picked for Homeland Security Secretary, pending Senate confirmation. Former acting ICE Director Tom Homan is now going to be the border czar. Homan previously discussed his vision for mass deportations, saying they would first concentrate on expelling criminals and national security threats. He didn't rule out deporting families together. On Monday, he told Fox News America Reports he's heading to Mar-a-Lago this week to put the final touches on the plan. Homan reiterated his plan to take the handcuffs off ICE, ramp up arrests, though he noted that he'll need more resources to carry it out, and said there are a lot of what ifs. So I've been asked 1,000 times, how many people can you remove the first year? Well, how many agents do I have? He said, can we bring rehired agents back? The ones that are retired. Retired, not rehired. I don't. That's a typo in the article. Bring them back and rehire them. How many buses do I have? How much money do I have for airplanes? Right? Can DoD assist, because DoD, which is the Defense Department, can take a lot off our plate? That's a lot of what ifs. Although we've had so many mixed reports, including yesterday, Manila, about whether the Defense Department would actually be involved. I don't know. You could declare a state of emergency, but my understanding is that would require invoking the Posse Comitatus Act in order to deploy U.S. military forces on American soil, which really would be a radical. It's legal, but it's definitely within the legal system an authoritarian move that harkens back to the Civil War. Lincoln used it in order to sort of suppress domestic dissent and also to try to keep Southern sympathizers from agitating in the North. He was not exactly big civil liberties guy, but I guess you could say he had good reasons not to be. But he had things to do, let's just say. This is definitely, for people who are advocates of immigrants and migrants, and particularly people who just sort of view this kind of stuff as, an issue about humaneness and humanity, there could be some really ugly scenes early next year.
Oh, for sure. I don't know if it would be any uglier than, if you remember, like in the 90s during the Clinton years, the Elian Gonzalez case, Cuban boy.
Very well. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was like that was like a very visceral memory for a lot of people, right? Because like here's this the look of that little boy, terrified, right?
Mhm.
With men with guns ripping him away from his uncle's arms, or maybe it was his aunt's arms. And he's just this tiny little toddler, right? I don't know that we're going to see that, play out on a case by case, one by one
Could be
scenario.
worse. It could be worse. I mean, it could be like
I don't
mass
know.
deport. I mean, I've seen mass deportations in other countries. Oddly, I was in Tajikistan on the border with Afghanistan. I happened to see a bunch of illegal Afghan immigrants to Tajikistan being returned to Afghanistan. They were all in a bus waiting at the river crossing to be returned to Afghanistan. And, it didn't help that it was in the middle of a hot war at the time in 2001. And
Oh,
the looks on their faces, I remember, and I had just gotten out of Afghanistan and, literally carrying the coffin of one of my colleagues, by hand.
Mhm.
And, we were, and I looked at these guys as we got to Tajikistan, and I was like, oh God, those poor bastards. They've got to go back there. They were living large in Tajikistan,
Oh,
where they
wow.
had
Well,
electricity part of the day and
oh,
some food and running water sometimes. I mean, they were seriously. I mean, it was sad. I mean,
well,
and especially when there's going to be. I mean, look, I'm never one of the women and children, but most people are, and the women and children thing is really going to, it's going to tug at heartstrings. I don't know. I'm curious and I'm skeptical as to whether the Trump administration will be able to stay the course, because this incoming president-elect is so obsessed with approval and popularity, that like bad optics and looking bad is not going to be something he's going to be very, if he
I
sees his
don't know.
approval
I don't know about that.
ratings plunge, he might not stay the course.
I don't know about that, Ted. I think the numbers that we saw, in the way of Latinos and even suburban white women voting for him, because
Oh yeah,
let's be real, those are the NIMBYs that
yeah,
came out to
but
vote for him.
for sure.
I saw them.
But Manila, it's one thing to vote for something; it's another thing to see it, right? I mean, like, there's a reason that like the Germans killed all of their victims, outside of Germany, right, in Poland and places like that, because it would have shocked people, civilians in Germany, to see what was going on. It's one thing to say like, "Oh, I'm an anti-Semite." It's another thing to watch people be pushed into ovens. It's
Well, I mean, this isn't necessarily being pushed into ovens, and I'll play a little bit of the devil's advocate here. Is that what the Biden administration did was turned the term illegal into they converted them to legal asylees or refugees or whatever, migrants, whatever you want to call them.
they're asylum
Because
applicants.
they changed the definition of what that is. And that's why they were able to put out the numbers to say, "Oh, look, there are so much fewer illegal immigrants coming in, the last 2 years." Well, yeah, that's because you guys changed the definition of what illegal migrant is and made everybody that's sneaking across the border, you made them go through the app and whatever, and now you're all legal migrants, and now you're all waiting in this backed up, uh judicial system that we have, right? So if you call everybody that comes here without, having put their name on the list, if you just call everybody legal, then of course there's no illegal crossing. So it's not that I'm against all of these people, and I get it, like I get why they're fleeing and I get why they want to come here, but at the end of the day, a lot of these people are not supposed to be here. And they didn't go through the normal channels like people like, for example, my family in the 70s that were fleeing actual war, right? A lot of these people coming from south of the border are not fleeing actual war. They're if anything, they're economic migrants. And I get that they're looking for a better life, and the vast majority of them are not criminals. The vast majority of them are not terrorists. The vast majority of them are not going to rape and pillage your family. That's not going to happen. But at the end of the day, the crime was them coming through the border in the first place. And just because when they're met at the border, the Biden administration changed the definition. I mean, sure, technically under this administration, they're no longer breaking the law, but the law that's been in place forever and ever. Oh, you're on mute, Ted.
There's no technical. The law is either the law or it's not
Right,
the
he
law.
changed
Right?
it. He
They
changed it.
changed the
I'm
law, so
saying
that's the
they
law.
changed the law. So now
Right.
they're not illegal. But the status quo law, as we had to control the influx of millions of people at this rate, I think there are social and economic issues that really that the vast majority of left-leaning bleeding hearts like yourself, Ted, that people don't want to see or don't want to address is, for example, what we see in England, right? With the murder of those little girls doing a Taylor Swift dance class or whatever. Even though the boy that killed them was British born, his parents were probably legal immigrants at that, but that's not the point. Their whole thing was talking about how many migrants or immigrants who emigrated, even if it was legal, to the UK, and the influx of all these new people into this society, this Western society, and that their cultures are perhaps incompatible with British society. And there's been a lot of clashes, right? And we see that with the soccer hooligans, and we see, all of that. There are a lot of societal things that are incompatible with the American way of life, and all these people are not going through the proper channels. They're not getting, not only not vetted, but they're not going through where you would have in local communities when they are placed somewhere. Maybe say it's a church like my family, right? Where a church organization would help you acclimate to American life. Like, here's what's, it's the social norm here, and here's blah, blah, blah. There's none of that infrastructure, that human infrastructure in place. So I think that's why
Wait. I mean, that's not
you're
really
seeing the
true.
uproar.
I mean, there's not enough human infrastructure, but none is an
It's
exaggeration.
not enough.
There are
Fair. Okay.
groups that are right, and there's family
But
members.
not enough. Vastly
There's
not enough.
I mean, and look, obviously the whole history of immigration into the United States has always been, fraught. People are always worried about the failure of, there's not enough assimilation. It's hard for new arrivals to fit in. They don't learn the language. I mean, if you go to the Tenement Museum in Lower East Side of Manhattan, which is a museum of where a lot of immigrants arrived, from Ellis Island, you'll see letters to the editor, saying, oh, these fucking Germans, they don't want to learn our language. They just speak German. Their kids are like little street urchins and ruffians. And then it's like the Irish, they don't, they're never going to learn English. And they say it, the Italians, and obviously it's always a little rough for the first generation. But when you say, the American way of life, I mean, the point is the American way of life changes and becomes, it adapts and adjusts and it evolves and in most cases improves because of the arrival of new people from overseas.
I'm all for that. I get
look
that.
I remember
like
doing
I said, the
radio
infrastructure isn't there.
But I remember doing radio in LA, and people would complain about, Mexican immigrants, and I was like, all of Southern California would look like a thousand oaks, boring as shit. It's like the poltergeist where they call the poltergeist. It's like, if it wasn't for the Mexicans, there'd be no good food.
I'm all for the taco trucks at every street corner.
There would be no cool culture in Southern California if it wasn't for Mexican nationals, right? Or who would come over.
Well, look. Last thing I'll mention though, Ted, and I'm seeing this firsthand, right? And I appreciate that there needs to be a way for new immigrants, people that emigrated here, right? Emigrated here with the E, that they should celebrate their own culture, their own languages or whatever. But there is a fine line between also adapting to American culture. And I'm not saying you have to do like all the Asians in the 70s and 80s did, that they come to the US and suddenly your name's Sally or Jenny or Susan. You don't have to do that. That's fine.
Or when you become a French citizen, I'm a French
right, they name you.
Yeah, when my ex-wife got married, became a French citizen, they had to
by way of Ted Rall,
Francisize her name, and and make
Like
her and give her, she already had an American
francophone
name.
her name.
They had
Yeah, they francophoned her name.
By the
Yeah,
way, in
so,
order to become
like,
a French citizen, you even if you're entitled like that way, you have to promise to like take French classes and learn French and stuff like that.
okay, see,
And I
there's
don't know that
that
that's
I can
I don't know
appreciate.
that that's bad, to be honest.
I don't think that's a bad thing, and that's what I was getting to, is
They
the
should be
last thing I'll
free,
mention.
but
There should be structure for it, infrastructure. The last thing I'll mention is that because I'm a mom of a little one that's in elementary school, when I was a kid, in the early 80s, I remember whole classes dedicated to ESL,
sure,
English as a second language.
yeah,
They've largely done away with that, Ted. I don't know if you
yeah,
know that.
because they've mainstreamed those kids into the regular
Yeah.
classes.
They threw them into all the regular classes. So
So
as a means
every
to
class now has two teachers, right? There's the teacher and there's the
and a
co-teacher.
like a teacher's aide. Yeah, like a
Yeah, well,
aide or
they call her. They call
something.
her. Usually, it's a her, the co-teacher.
Yeah, it is. And so, but here's the thing is they don't necessarily speak the language of all the ESL kids that should be in
Sure.
ESL. And the problem I'm seeing is that they have watered down the instructional courses for things to make sense, to even, I don't want to call them the lowest common denominator,
Well,
but
but
that's
that's always
largely
what
what it is.
classes
Like,
do, and look, frankly, I'm going to come off as an elitist. It always bugged me that we didn't have mainstreaming when I was too old to have for that, but still, every classroom inevitably, and I defy any teacher to tell me different. Every classroom moves at the speed of the slowest student.
right.
That's just
Right.
that's just the case, and
But
so it's a problem.
that wasn't my personal experience, but I'm certainly seeing it now in my son's schooling, which is why I'm considering homeschooling at all, because there not only are there language barriers that the teachers have to go through because of the influx of new immigrants into the communities, but I think this is what the whole Trump movement was addressing, is that this is a problem, a societal problem. And I think he's just riding on hyperbole about, oh, they're killing and mass raping everybody. They're not any rapier than a white American.
No, studies have shown that they commit crimes in smaller proportions than native
they're not as
U.S.
rapey
citizens.
Yeah.
All right, we got stuff to go. Let's go, because we
Let's
got more controversy here. All right, this story made my blood boil, by the way, Manila. As Gaza's hunger crisis continues to worsen, organized gangs are stealing much of the aid Israel allows into the enclave, operating freely in areas controlled by the Israeli military, according to aid group officials, humanitarian workers, transport companies, and witnesses. Officials said that criminal looting has become the greatest impediment to distributing aid in southern Gaza, home to the vast majority of displaced Palestinians. 90% of all Gazans have now been displaced. Armed bands of men have killed, beaten, and kidnapped aid truck drivers in the area around Israel's Karim Shalom crossing. That's the main entry point into southern Gaza, according to aid workers and transport companies. The thieves, who used to run cigarette smuggling operations throughout the year, but are now also stealing food and other supplies, are tied to local criminal gangs, residents say. Now, contrary to what the IDF says, the gangs are actually rivals of Hamas, and in some cases, they've been targeted by remnants of Hamas's security forces in other parts of the enclave. And Hamas, in other words, had been providing security, but then the IDF was shooting the Hamas police officers, so security started to break down, and that's where we got into where we are now. An internal UN memo obtained by the Washington Post concluded last month that the gangs may be benefiting from a passive, if not active, benevolence or protection from the Israel Defense Forces. One gang leader, the memo says, established a military-like compound in an area that is restricted, controlled, and patrolled by the IDF. In other words, the IDF is facilitating the theft of food and other supplies by these gangs.
You don't say.
In the latest major incident, 98 out of 109 trucks carrying UN food aid from Karim Shalom were ransacked by armed men overnight over the weekend, according to UN humanitarian agencies and Gaza businessman Adam Shuhaibar, who had 8 of his trucks in the convoy. The looters shot at the trucks and detained a driver for hours, he said. A statement from UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, said the attack caused injuries to transporters and extensive vehicle damage. Muhammad Hadi, UN humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territories, said Gaza is basically lawless. There is no security anywhere. Israel is the occupying power, he said, so this is on them. They need to make sure that the area is protected and secured. Now, the Israelis have always been weasels about Gaza ever since they withdrew their settlers back in 2005, I think it was. They said, well, we're not really the occupying power. They are the occupying power because they control all the borders and the sea entrances. But now there's no question that they're the occupying power because they've invaded and they occupy it. So, there's not.
Yeah, but according to Mike Huckabee, Ted, Palestine isn't real. It isn't a thing. And there's no such thing as settlers. They don't exist, Ted. Right. So I don't know what you just read us right now.
I know the thing that's so funny about that whole argument is they'll say, Zionists will say, well, Palestine was never a country. I'm like, so? that's not a point. It's not relevant. Or there were never people called Palestinians. Well, first of all, they're
the Philistines.
But there were. But it's but even if there hadn't been, so? What's
so
your
what?
point?
Israel didn't exist either as a country until the 1940s.
Yeah, they're lying and saying that they've been there continuously for 3,500 years. It's no, you weren't. You were there in tiny, minutia, single-digit percentage of the population. Sure, yeah, no question. But you've never had a dominant. I mean, basically, the Jews were tossed out of what is today Palestine 2,000 years ago, 1,900 years ago, and they were there in very small numbers until the Ottomans, the end of the Ottoman Empire and all that. I mean, I know the history. I mean, it's but anyway, it's when you see the video out of Gaza, I mean, it's just a reminder. I mean, Israel's behavior, their comportment is so disgusting that there is literally no room anymore for nuance. I mean, it's yes, they had a right to defend themselves after October 7th. No question about it. This is not defense. It's not self-defense. This is you're raping and pillaging. You are engaged in ethnic cleansing. You're plundering. You are. Well, they are. The Israelis, the soldiers have been raping the locals. So there's that. So it's really gross.
I mean, I can't add anything more to that, Ted. I mean, the article in and of itself says everything right there.
Damning.
I mean, it's just disgusting. Everybody knows that this is happening, and the Biden administration, when they really, really could do, they did something wrong with the Ukraine thing, obviously with the ATACMS. You could do something really right here. You guys you're on your way out. Who gives a fuck anymore? You can do something right at least once. You could do something right. And you have a little leverage by way of money and weapons. This little thing, money and weapons. Israel couldn't continue this if you took a hard, firm stance against it. But there's little daylight between Joe Biden and Mike Huckabee at this point. This is ridiculous.
None.
There's none. There's no daylight.
Yeah,
so
I mean, I know there's people
from
who are
the White
saying,
House
well,
right now. Oh God, pathetic, weak.
I know there are people who are mad at people who didn't turn up for Kamala Harris because they're well, it's going to get even worse under Trump, and who knows? It's hard to see how much worse it could really get at this point. But both to me, I don't see a lot. I agree with you. I don't see much daylight between the Democratic and Republican parties. They're both in the tank for Israel, no question about it.
So
all right, let's keep going. Spirit Airlines, whose approach to selling cheap tickets without amenities, earned it both fans. Do we
still call them airlines?
And I know it's like Airbus. Filed for bankruptcy protection on Monday after a string of setbacks. Most recently, a failure to renegotiate its looming debt. Just to freak you out, I thought 2-3 years ago, I was reading about how they were raking in massive profits. Do you remember those stories? Yeah, Spirit was a very profitable airline. But
no
anyway,
kidding. I've never flown them, ever.
Oh, no, it's not a real airline. I would not fly. I walked by. You know how I decided not to ever fly Spirit? I was at LaGuardia a number of years ago, and they were kind of new at the time. And I saw a bunch of people like sort of milling around, obviously dealing with fucked up, like canceled flights. And it was Spirit at the Spirit counter, whatever, that happens. And they were doing the updates on a whiteboard behind the counter. In other words, and I asked about it, and they said Spirit did not pay to be on the electronic system at LaGuardia.
You're kidding.
Yeah. So it's like Bob's Airline, and
they're
Curly
that
Fries.
like ghetto, low
They're
budget.
Ghetto. There's no other word. Yeah, they're ghetto. So like,
oh my god, I've
I
never
was like,
flown
and then
them.
it's literally like, okay, all right, no, and I was like, okay, that's totally terrifying. I mean, what else are they skimping on, when it comes to safety? Anyway, the airline, which last reported a profit in 2019, has had trouble finding its footing after a federal judge blocked a merger with JetBlue in January. I'm so happy that didn't go through, because I fly JetBlue sometimes, and I don't want it to be...
I used to fly JetBlue.
I don't want it to be Spiritized in any way. Spirit has also struggled to capitalize on the recovery from the pandemic due to intense competition, engine problems, and other factors. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection here in New York City. It also announced an agreement with bondholders to restructure its debts and raise money to help it operate during the bankruptcy process, which it expects to exit in Q1 of next year. Spirit, which has lost more than $2.2 billion since the start of 2020, published an open letter to customers. I don't know if that letter was like written on a whiteboard or whatever, saying that flyers could use all tickets, credits, and loyalty points as normal. So, in other words, Spirit's not going out of business. If you're so unfortunate as to hold tickets for Spirit Airlines, they are still going to stay in business, sadly. And yeah.
So what you're telling me is, if someone gifts you like tickets from Spirit, they're not really your friend.
That is exactly right. That's exactly what I'm saying. And finally, the married. This is like totally. This is on the Yucko meter. This is at least an 8. The married MSNBC hosts Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough drove half an hour from their home in Florida on Friday to meet with an old friend turned enemy, Donald Trump. Even for talk show hosts, elections have consequences. For those asking, why would we go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't me? Brzezinski told viewers on Monday, disclosing the meeting for the first time. Oh, can I answer that question, Mika? Let me answer that question. Because you're a hypocritical piece of shit, and you look like you're selling out after going on and on and on and on about how Donald Trump was the devil. But now, because your ratings have cratered after following the election, you want to be relevant, and you want to try to slither back into the Donald's good graces. It's gross. That's why Joe and I realized it's time to do something different. Yeah, at a very convenient time, right? And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him. Why don't you also talk to Chase Oliver and Jill Stein? That'd be more interesting, frankly.
Right. Stop maligning everybody.
The meeting at Mar-a-Lago was their first in-person encounter in 7 years. Scarborough said that the group had discussed abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets, and that there had been plenty of disagreement to go around. What we did agree on, Brzezinski added, was to restart communications. She compared the summit to the diplomatic work of her father. So big news of Brzezinski, who was a professor at my alma mater, Columbia University School of International Affairs, who was President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. Brzezinski, of course, also famously basically caused 9/11 by financing the groups in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union that ultimately became Al-Qaeda. So that was really, talk about a bad seed.
Okay. So I think if we see Rachel Maddow groveling over at Mar-a-Lago, that's going to be
Chris
wow.
Hayes.
Just when they start Jim Acosta going over there from CNN, I don't know. Other than MSNBC is a piece of property that's about to be sold by who owns them? Comcast? Is that who owns them now? I don't even know.
I think it's GE, isn't it? Or it used to be.
I don't even know who owns them anymore,
Yeah.
but they are MSNBC is a piece of property that is a dog. There's no appreciation there. It's a liability at this point for the parent company. I think it's Comcast, but they are trying
It
to
is
dump
Comcast.
it.
You are correct.
They are trying to dump it because it is a dog. It is a loser. It's not making any money. And that's why Mika and Joe got sent over there by Comcast, and I would assume Bill Gates, because the M in MSNBC is Microsoft. So I think the MS part is Microsoft. So I think, the powers that be made them go over there and kiss some orange ass, to maybe try to bring him on as a guest. I mean, seriously, that's how this
That's what
business
this is
works.
about. Yeah, that
That's what
is
this
how it
business
works.
is. This is how it works. So, they're disingenuous at best.
It's totally disingenuous. Not to mention, like, yeah, I don't know. I think it speaks for itself. And speaking of disingenuous, we should probably get into our main topic here.
Yeah. Wait, I gotta change.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta change the line at the bottom, and that gives me a chance during the Jaws. Okay, so we'll leave Mika and Joe be. And by the way, I am shocked to find out that Mika Brzezinski is only 57, and she needed like a full facelift at 57.
That is a little bit surprising.
Like before, because she had it done 4 years ago?
Well,
Or
she
so
looks
when
great,
Trump
honestly, but of course she
Well,
looks
now
fake great. But she
fake
well, she's-
great, but
look, I mean, look,
like Martha
she
Stewart.
is a pretty woman, no question about it.
Look, but she was when she got the facelift, it was during Trump's first go round. So maybe she would have been like 50 when she got it. Like that's
Mhm.
really young to get a full facelift. I'm just saying 50 because I'm not that far off from 50. And I don't know. She looks great now, like Martha Stewart. Great. Martha's like 700 and Martha looks amazing. So
And they're both sort of,
okay.
ethnically, they're both Polish, right? So.
Oh, is she really? Martha Stewart?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, God bless Martha Stewart. All right, hit the Jaws.
A smear,
All
the
right.
dictionary says, is a word or statement applied to a person in order to degrade, blacken, or make unjust or unfounded accusations. I know a little bit about that, and I may get into that, into my personal experience in this story. But first, the lead in today's New York Times, a story titled, How Tulsi Gabbard Became a Favorite of Russia's State Media, is a textbook example of a smear, relying on guilt by association, reading into similarities between her opinions and those of American adversaries like Russia, assuming the worst about her while taking her enemies' statements at face value, and twisting reality into a pretzel to normalize insanity and marginalize the facts. The Times piece shows you how state-sponsored media propaganda works in the real world, in this case, as part of a concerted effort to sabotage President-elect Trump's nominee for Director of National Intelligence. Missing, by the paper's own account, no doubt in order to avoid yet another costly libel suit like the one that they're facing from Sarah Palin, is any evidence whatsoever that Gabbard is actually a Russian asset or has done anything wrong at all. Times editors obviously assume that few readers will read beyond the headline, or if they do, will read with the skeptical eye of a veteran journalist. And that's probably true unless they listen to us here on the TMI Show. Let's dissect the smear campaign against Tulsi Gabbard in order to showcase how mainstream corporate media outlets undermine reputations and lives. I'm going to read a few little segments here. First of all, let's start with the headline, which is probably what 90% of all Times consumers will read and not go beyond. How Tulsi Gabbard became a favorite of Russia's state media. Okay, so first of all, the implication is clear, but it doesn't say anything. I mean, what if Jesus Christ became a favorite of Russia's state media? It doesn't mean just because if Russia's state media likes kittens, it doesn't mean the kittens are bad. President-elect Donald J. Trump's pick to be the Director of National Intelligence has raised alarms among national security officials. That's the subhead. Okay, well, national security officials, you mean the same people who got us into the war in Iraq. I'm not that excited about what fucking national security officials have to say. Right. But anyway, here we go. So it starts out, in 2017, Tulsi traveled to Syria and met the country's president, authoritarian president, Bashar al-Assad. She also accused the U.S. of supporting terrorists there. Now, I want to be very clear. The U.S. did support terrorists there. They supported something called the Free Syrian Army, and specifically the Al-Nusra Front, which is a State Department designated terrorist organization. So it's like that is a fact. And these guys then they morphed in with ISIS, who are the biggest terrorists of all time. So this is just true. But that's
this whole article is like the Princess Bride, Ted. The whole article is like, I don't think that means what you think it means. Like the whole entire article.
This is how a smear works. It's all about the tone. Then the day after Putin began his invasion of Ukraine in 2012, I like to say full scale.
Full scale. That's talking points.
As opposed to what? A half-assed invasion? Gabbard blamed the U.S. and NATO for provoking the war by ignoring Russia's security concerns. That's also the mainstream view of inside the U.S. national security establishment. It is widely believed by U.S. experts, including conservative ones, who are very pro-military, that we provoked the war between Russia and Ukraine. Because it's true. It is true. She has since suggested that the U.S. covertly worked with Ukraine on dangerous biological pathogens. They did.
Victoria Nuland told us on the stand.
Correct, and was culpable for the bombing of the Nord Stream gas pipeline in September 2022. That's probably almost certainly true as well. European prosecutors and U.S. officials say that the sabotage was carried out by Ukrainian operatives. They're lying, unlike Tulsi. By the way, Tulsi Gabbard really disappointed me. She's a fake peace advocate. She's a fake progressive.
Sure.
I don't really like her as much as I used to. She turned out to be sort of full of shit. But this is a smear. So I'm not like in the tank for Tulsi Gabbard. I wouldn't, but
I'm not in love with Tulsi like I was.
This is all bullshit though. And I think fair is fair. Fair is fair.
Yeah.
So here we go. Ms. Gabbard's comments have earned her sharp rebukes from officials across the political spectrum in Washington. In other words, all the cool kids are against her, who have accused
the
her
establishment.
Here we go. This is so funny. Who have accused her of parroting the anti-American propaganda of the country's adversaries. So is parroting anti-American propaganda bad if the anti-American propaganda is all accurate? I would say no.
Right.
It's like, okay. Here we go.
Wait, you have to cheerlead the Iraq War, Ted, or else you're just anti-American. That's
Correct.
how all this started. That's how this all began.
If you're not an insane warmonger, then you're, unqualified to be DNI.
You hate your country. If you don't love war, you hate your country.
You're anti-American.
You're not American.
Her selection to be DNI has raised alarms. Because she's embraced a worldview that mirrors disinformation straight out of the Kremlin's playbook. Well, where's the disinformation? They never no disinformation has been stated.
Right.
So now here we go. Obviously some lawyer.
I highlighted it right there.
Some lawyer at the time said, no evidence has emerged that she has ever collaborated in any way with Russia's intelligence agencies. Okay, so that's really crucial, right? So she's been accused of being a Russian asset by Hillary Clinton.
Liz Warren
called her, not a Russian asset, but something similar to that.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, instead, Gabbard simply seems to share the Kremlin's geopolitical views, especially when it comes to, there was that old joke, reality has a liberal bias. Well, it may be that international reality has an anti-American bias because American foreign policy is really rancid.
Shit.
Okay, anyway, then it says, okay, in Russia, the reaction to her potential appointment has been gleeful, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, let's just say that's true. I don't know that that's really true, but let's say that is true. It's like, okay, so it might be something much simpler, which is they're like, maybe a little sanity is finally prevailing in America.
Right.
And they're going to have someone in high office that we can talk to who's not out of their fucking mind
Who's
trying
not
to start
insane.
World War
Right.
III. Right. So, I mean, that's not really, I mean, it's like everything is not adversarial, right? It's like, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
We still have that zero sum.
Russian media has
ones and
emphasized
zeros.
Gabbard's desire to improve relations with Moscow. Ooh, we can't have that. And then
Well, no.
and
Well, hold
so,
on. We got to go back here and read this part, Ted, from
oh, yes.
Komsomolskaya Pravda, the newspaper in Russia. It says the CIA and the FBI are trembling, says that newspaper, in a glowing profile of Ms. Gabbard, noting positively that Ukrainians consider her an agent of the Russian state. Well, that's true. They put her on a kill list. The Ukrainians put Tulsi Gabbard on a kill list while she was a sitting congresswoman.
I would also like to point out that although I am not a, I don't suck up to the military or people or veterans or anything like that. I don't think that veterans have done anything more useful for America than, say, nurses and teachers. Quite the contrary. It is still within their own construct. This is a woman who has served in the U.S. military. She was honorably discharged by all accounts. She was able and capable.
No, she's not discharged. She's still a lieutenant colonel
she's
today.
Still, okay, so she's
still
like,
active.
She's still active, and like, so how? I mean, how dare they? Anyway, so Gabbard fits an overall pattern of Trump breaking with much of the post-Cold War consensus, says Jonathan Tubner, the chief executive of Filter Labs. She is, for Russia, the one that perhaps most perfectly embodies the changes they were hoping for from the U.S. So fucking what? Anyway, Trump's critics called the choice a dangerous one. By the way, they don't interview anybody who likes her. They don't ask Trump or any Trump people for comment. They can't find any progressives who say like there's nothing wrong with this. They can't find. Literally, it's such a hatchet job. And this was the lead story in today's New York Times. I mean, this is so scurrilous, but this is how a smear works. It's all by insinuation. There's no proof. You say, well, actually, there's no proof. But look at this, and look at that, and look at this, and look at that.
You imply and insinuate.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the Alfred Hitchcock way of writing a shit article, a shit hit piece, is by letting the viewer, or in this case, the reader, connect the dots themselves and jump to their own biases.
Now listen to this. This Ruth Ben-Ghiat, professor of history at NYU. This is an amazing, like, if then. I love this. Nominating Gabbard for director for DNI is the way to Putin's heart, and it tells the world that America under Trump will be the Kremlin's ally rather than an adversary. I just like to remind everyone that the America under FDR was the Kremlin's ally rather than an adversary.
Right. I don't think this is a bad thing.
No, I don't either. But anyway, I think that would be great. I would love to be the Kremlin, to have the U.S. and Russia be allies.
Be friends.
I want the U.S. to be allies with everyone. Okay, like really. And so anyway,
wouldn't that be nice?
And so, in other words, if then, and so we would have a national security official who would potentially compromise our national security. But please tell me, please explain to me, riddle me this. How does it follow that if the U.S. somewhere were to become allied with Russia, that would compromise our national security? In fact, I think it would probably greatly increase our national security, because we would be turning an enemy into a friend.
I agree. Something? We're in upside down world. So her and so we're going to compromise we're going to be at risk now with Tulsi Gabbard in there because she wants to be fucking friends with other people. Like, what the fuck is that? No, like that makes no sense in common sense world, Ted, but in the whole, let me harken back to 2 paragraphs ago when they were saying a post-Cold War view of the world. The problem is the rest of us do live in a post-Cold War world, and we expected America and Russia to be friends because the Russians had actually reached out their hands to be friends, including with directly when Putin was the prime minister. He tried to reach out to, make nice with Clinton, and Clinton was like, yeah, bro, that's not happening. We're just sit over there. Just sit over there, young Vlad.
Let me continue a little bit. This war and suffering could easily have been avoided. Oh, wait. So here we go. Since then, she has broken with the Democratic Party and drifted towards a conspiratorial view of the world and American power in it. I continue, no break here. What exactly is this conspiratorial world, a view that they're talking about? This war and suffering could have easily been avoided if Biden administration and NATO had simply acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns regarding Ukraine's becoming a member of NATO, which would mean U.S. NATO forces right on Russia's border, she wrote on Twitter when the war began in February 2022. Okay, so you might disagree with that assessment, but there's nothing, which I agree with it 100%, but where's the conspiracy? I mean, what's conspiratorial about that? This is just, and there's no, I mean, it's like, do you even know what a conspiracy is? Like, it's like,
yeah.
I don't even understand.
Facts are now fiction in this new clown world that we're in. Facts are fiction. If it doesn't comport or fit in your whatever fucked up narrative you have, and that's just what we're witnessing. And the New York Times, like, for God's sake, they're talking to a small sliver of what's left of their audience, because people like me, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I had big dreams of like wanting to move to New York and working at the New York Times, but that quickly went away by the time I was in college in the early 2000s, because they've just chipped away at their credibility during the Iraq War. And that's when I went, oh, I don't dream that anymore. And this is more evidence of that. This is just more like, what are they even writing here? What are they even saying? Right? Like,
well, I don't even know. And they just go on. What's really crazy
is it just goes on and on.
If you know anything about history, you're just like, okay, so almost everything she says, except for being sort of anti-gay in some respects,
right,
is true, right? Like, so she says, she criticized the Obama administration for failing to properly call out Islamist extremists. She also questioned evidence showing that Syrian forces used chemical weapons in an attack that killed dozens. Okay,
that's been debunked.
Seymour
the
Hersh
whole narrative
that never happened. It did.
It's been debunked.
Happen. It's been
Aaron
debunked.
Aaron Mate was on the ground and he debunked that. Aaron Mate went there and debunked all of this and just all of this. So like I said, like everything that they have said from the get-go that they think is maligning her, anybody that knows the actual facts about what happened is like, yeah, but that's all true and that's all good. So what are we even talking about in this article?
And then, of course, her appearances were regularly picked up by Russia's state media, including the international network RT, which promoted her critiques and lauded her with headlines such as Tulsi Gabbard dares to challenge Washington's war machine. Okay, sounds accurate to me. And Biden wants regime change in Russia. Ex-Congresswoman.
That's all true.
That's also true.
They said it.
There's no secret that Biden wanted to overthrow Putin. Right? No secret at all.
He said it. Biden himself actually said this about Vladimir Putin
a bunch of times.
And yeah, a bunch. It's not one time, not two times.
The policies are pretty clearly that's what their goal is, right?
And Victoria Nuland repeatedly, when she was still in her official capacity, repeatedly said this on the stand, during testimony, over and over. So this is how the smears work.
When I'm not going to make this all. We're short on time, and I don't want to make this about me. But most people who are listening know that I sued the LA Times for libeling me, and that judges, for the most part, sided with me throughout this case. And the way and when they wrote about me, they were like, "Oh, basically, we can't trust what Ted Rall had to say about cops, and because he has criticized cops many times in the past." And I'm like, but I've never said that I didn't criticize cops. You know what I mean? Like, there's literally Ted Rall said that the police are often violent against civilians. I'm like, they are.
Well, because
Ted Rall said that they are often mean to people of color. I'm like, that's well established. It was like, that's how this is written, where you're sort of like, you're in some kind of weird echo chamber where it's like you're in Wally World. You're in a strange place.
I don't get it.
You're saying a bunch of things that are true and that are being countered by liars. And then we're supposed to side with the liars, even though we know they're liars.
Right. That's just it. And now, speaking of lying, I have a couple sound bites that Ted has never seen yet. Ted hasn't seen them yet. Ted has never seen these, so I'm going to throw these. And
I'm
speaking
coming
of
so
liars,
cold. I don't even know what these are about. Could be about
correct.
anything. No idea. No clue.
This is like soundbite roulette for Ted that I'm playing with Ted.
Right.
So speaking of liars, we know that like a lot of the media, just doesn't say things because it's maybe impolite, right, Ted, or whatever, right? But Matt Gaetz don't give a fuck.
Yeah, that is true.
He really, really doesn't. So the incoming AG, I think this is right before he quit being a Congress member.
By the way, I just want to remind people that, he wouldn't be the first truly gross AG. There's been a bunch. Janet Reno burned little kids up, charcoal broiled them.
Yeah.
And
she was a giant woman.
She was like a ham hock. She was the Ted Kennedy of ladies. And then there was and then of course Alberto Gonzalez, who loved him some torture. I just want to say, if Matt Gaetz gets the gig, he'll just be another turd.
Yeah, just don't worry about it. But so here's this soundbite, Ted. I want you to react to if there's some chance in hell Matt Gaetz gets confirmed. This is why I would get the popcorn.
All right, let's hear it. Let's do it.
Is it safe to say that based off of your comments, you're suggesting that these women at these abortion rallies are ugly and overweight?
Yes.
What do you say to people who think that those comments are offensive?
Be offended.
Mm-hmm. Is it safe to say that based off of your comments, you're suggesting that these women at these...
That's all it is. It's just, he's like, yes.
This is, by the way, it's a variant of a... So I have this... So let me react. So I had a friend who was really into George Carlin, and she said, but I stopped. I love George Carlin. I stopped listening to George Carlin because of that one joke.
I have everything of his.
And I said, what do you mean one joke? And she said, yeah, there was this one joke. And I said, so how much do you like George Carlin? Long story short, she had gone to his concerts. She had she had bought all of his records. But this one joke made her dead to him. And I'm like, so I was like, this is kind of the problem with doing what I do. I mean, political satire, right? In my case, drawing and some writing, but mostly drawing. But I was like, so you're telling me that you heard tens of thousands of George Carlin jokes and you loved them. But then there's this
They all landed.
So they all landed. So the dude's batting 999 for you, but you're like, fuck him over this one thing. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, what is it? And so here's the joke. It's related to Matt Gaetz. Have you ever noticed that the women who are against abortion are women you wouldn't want to fuck anyway?
I know that one.
So, it's pretty funny. And this is along those lines. But
in the reverse.
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, reverse. People would say that this is sexist and misogynist. I would not. I would say it's lookist. You could certainly.
Lookist.
It is lookist. I mean, I guess the question is lookism bad? I'll leave that to others to judge. I mean, I definitely don't think that because someone's, it doesn't. It's sort of like, I mean, I don't know. I don't lose any sleep.
I'll summarize.
Some people are ugly.
I'll summarize.
Some people.
I'll summarize.
Maybe I'm ugly. I don't know. Some people.
I'll summarize.
A lot of people think I'm ugly. Whatever.
From the car business, as we always said, because sometimes there are just some hideous cars that came out, and sometimes they modified them to be even uglier. And what we would always say in the car business was, hey, there's an ass for every seat. Somebody's going to buy it.
For every Jack, there's a Jill. Look at Matt Gaetz. I mean, it's like, I'm not the one running around with a bouffant hairdo. Not that I could pull one off.
I think he looks a little bit like Jack Nicholson. He's got the eyebrows maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. He looks Jack Nicholson-esque, good or bad, whatever. But I
do imagine him as like a member of a biker gang in the 50s, like a greaser.
This kid?
Matt Gaetz, yeah, that hair.
Really?
That face?
Well,
yeah.
I mean, the hair.
Leather
jacket.
Imagine the leather jacket.
Some people have really puffy hair. So, I'm I'm not going to be lookist
No, I
on
mean, he
him
actually
either.
has great.
So-
It's a nice head of hair, no question.
It's a good head of hair. It's a good
No,
head of
it's
hair.
true.
It's kind of puffy, and the sideburns are a little long, but like it's whatever. He's pretty typical. Whatever. He looks like a bro from Florida to me. I would expect him to be more orange, but okay. Let's move along to this one. So the family portrait that everybody, or family picture that everybody's talking about, right? Nobody even cared, Ted, that this past weekend, that the G-20 happened. Nobody's talking about it. Like,
That's true.
Nobody
By
cares.
the way, is Russia in the G20?
No, they're kicked out to.
I know they were kicked
don't
out
know.
of the G8. That made it the G7.
Right. So I don't
Although
know.
they should.
who
Why
would
didn't they
replace
elevate
them.
whoever was number 9 to the
Right.
8 spot?
Right. So I
Then
don't know. Maybe they
called it
did.
like the G7.5 or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they did. But so here's this family portrait or photo, and listen. This is C-SPAN. Okay, C-SPAN. So they're nonpartisan. They're just kind of there, right? Filming for posterity.
Sure.
Just posterity. Listen to the cameraman and the female producer. Okay, listen. No Biden, she says.
They're telling Biden. They're telling him to wait for Biden, guys. Oh my God. Do you see him, Joe? Far left. Left to the left of the palm tree. Oh my God. But they took it.
But they took it. The picture's done. They're like, wait for Biden. Wait.
Joe, you're behind the palm tree right now.
Grandpa's wandering.
The C-SPAN is looking. Their cameras are looking for Biden. The female producer's like, he's behind the palm tree. Behind the palm tree. Is he hiding behind the palm tree? Is he like what's he doing? Where? But they took the picture without him, is the point. They took the picture without Joe Biden.
He's Joe. That's Trudeau.
Right there. She's like, right there. There he is.
He could go missing anytime. This would be like that. This would be like that movie
read?
Dick about Nixon, where he goes on wild adventures with his new friend.
What's your read on this? That the G20 family picture, the last one, this is the last one before Biden leaves office. They like Biden. I don't know. They say that Trudeau and Biden were running a little tardy, and that's why they didn't make the picture. But clearly he was there. He got there in time that they could have waited 10 seconds to be like, okay, Biden, let's have you step up. Let's have you run up there, run up those bleachers. He'll probably trip and fall. So what does it say to you that the G19 decided to take pictures sans the leader of the supposed free world?
Well, I guess the question is, you could say maybe when there's 20 people, you just sort of, after a while, they all kind of like, they're all interchangeable. And it's like, okay, that's like, it's like a teacher with like, a class of 20 strong. They go on a field trip. They're out in the forest. And it's like, roughly, it's not like there's 5 left. It looks like pretty much the same. And one kid doesn't make it back to the bus. And you're like, oh, shit, little Joey.
Oh, my God.
We lost little Joey. Oh, well, we'll have to call his parents and print up some milk cartons.
Oh, no.
I suspect it's probably something like that. Or the Joe's presence is such that, his absence actually adds to the proceedings. Like just by not being there, it felt like there was more people there. It's like he's a net negative.
Oh. Well, to me, it just reads like not only does the rest of the G20 not only does the rest of the gang not give a flying hoot about Joe Biden anymore because they're all panicked or worried or whatever about incoming Trump, that they didn't even show him enough respect to give him just an additional 30 seconds to get up there on the risers to get in the last family picture of Joe Biden's lifetime.
As they would say in Quebec, the land of Pierre Trudeau, or is tant pis. C'est triste.
They just didn't like, I do feel like that was kind of shitty of them. I do feel bad for Joe Biden here. You should have just waited another 30
what
seconds.
do you think happened, Manila? I mean, do you think
to let Grandpa in?
Do you think they just forgot, or they were just like, "Fuck it, we're doing it. We're on a tight schedule."
Yeah, I think that's what it was, and they're just like, "Fuck it, we're not even waiting 30 seconds." Even though he showed up and was maybe
tour bus. We told you to be back to the tour bus on time.
Yeah,
if you're
maybe.
Not here,
but according to the C-SPAN producer, the female voice, she's like, "He's right there. He's behind the palm tree. He's behind the palm tree." What is he doing?
Why is she saying, "Oh my God"? Do you think?
I think because having been in those shoes before, like her, "Oh my God," is probably like, this is his last photo. This is C-SPAN is like, obviously it's American, so they're like, we need the American president in the picture. Get him in there. Get him in there. Just and so obviously, she's an American producer for C-SPAN. So
to paraphrase the famous book about Hollywood, the kid does not stay in the picture.
Poor kid, poor old man. And I'm curious to know why he was playing hide and seek behind the palm tree.
Maybe he's taking a leak, man. He's old. When we say as you get older, it has to happen more often. I don't know. Okay, how about this one? Okay, another Fox News segment here. So about the attackums, we won't stay on this one too long. This one, incoming SecDef Mike Waltz. He says that nobody in the Biden administration contacted the transition team to say, this is what we're approving. Surprise!
So with 2 months left in office, Joe Biden has done something that's been called on to do since this war started, allow Ukraine to strike Russia with everything that we give them, the ATACMS, which are long-range missiles, hit Russia where they're trying to hit them from. Your reaction to that, and were you briefed ahead of time?
I was not, Brian, and it's another step up the escalation ladder, and nobody knows where this is going. North Korea is unleashing ballistic missiles, artillery, now tens of thousands of soldiers. The administration responds by lifting this restriction. North Korea sends more soldiers. South Korea is now saying it may get engaged. China is buying oil from Iran for pennies of the dollar. Iran is using that to send missiles and drones into Russia that is then hitting Ukrainian critical infrastructure. So this is a development, but it's a tactical one. President Trump is talking grand strategy here. How do we get both sides to the table to end this war? What's the framework for a deal? And who's sitting at that table? Those are the things that I and President Trump, of course, will be working with. Again, this is an all-star team, Brian, that President Trump is assembling that will think through these broader strategic issues and how do we drive this war to an end as president.
I don't know if Brian Hegseth is a part of an all-star team.
No, what's his name? Pete Hegseth. Pete, whatever. But Hegseth. So there's incoming SecDef Mike Waltz. I think he will get confirmed. I think because he is a sitting congressman out of Florida.
Well, wait. What is he?
This guy.
He's
Waltz.
not going to. But Hegseth is.
Oh, sorry, not SecDef. Sorry. Mike Waltz is going to be. I have him listed down wrong. Hegseth is going to be. Sorry.
Right.
But either way, the Trump administration, the incoming team, was not notified by the Biden exit team. So the exit team didn't talk to the incoming team. And should they be, Ted?
Look, I'm not an expert on that, but it's my, normally, traditionally, the White House always consults with, back the Gang of Eight or whatever, key members of Congress and the Senate. And certainly when there's a transition, any kind of substantial national security development is usually briefed to the incoming team, just so that they're
Right.
up to speed. We already know that President-elect Trump is already receiving national security briefings. So it would seem that this should be part of that. I mean, someone on his team fairly high up should have known about it. I mean, it's a major story. We're talking about it. Everybody's talking about it today. The Ukrainians have already started to use them. There are potential theoretical repercussions that could include nuclear apocalypse. So it seems to me like, maybe that
Yeah.
should have been briefed.
And Mike Waltz is the nominee for NSA, National Security Advisor.
Mhm.
So
Right.
so I feel like they should have
No, he should have been brought in. No question.
right something if not conferred with, at least notified. So they found out, it seems like, with the rest of the world, that Biden was like, Merry Christmas, Zelensky. Here's 6 attackums. There you go. And they were not cool with that. Okay. Last thing. This is like a few minutes. I think this is a fair thing to say about our incoming HHS secretary if he were to get confirmed, because there's a lot of controversy around RFK Jr. too. Because Ted, as we know, big pharma, big food, big ag are not really into RFK Jr.,
No,
right?
they're not.
Because there's so much money involved from pharmaceuticals
Big cash,
and all that.
giving us all big asses.
Yes, big. And so he put out this video this past week.
This is what most Americans innocently put into their bodies these days, and most alarmingly, into the bodies of their children. And it's no coincidence that Americans die earlier than Canadians or Germans or Italians or Japanese or Koreans or Australians or most any other comparable country. And it wasn't always that way until the early 1990s. Our life expectancy was the same or better than other developed countries. Then suddenly, more and more Americans began suffering from chronic diseases, from obesity, cancer, diabetes, kidney disease, Alzheimer's, heart disease, and all kinds of autoimmune diseases. Our maternal mortality rate soared to the highest of any developed country on earth. Same with infant mortality. Like the frog in the slowly boiling water, we didn't really notice as we got sicker and sicker. We've grown now to accept chronic disease conditions as normal. But now in 2024, we're finally waking up to this cataclysm, and we're asking ourselves, how in the world did this happen? A big part of it is our diet. Restaurants that serve contaminated food are fined or shut down. But when it's the government that approves the poison our food, a few people get very, very rich, and the toxins end up in every supermarket aisle. Let me show you what I mean. Doritos, Cheez-Its, Captain Crunch.
I love Doritos, by the way.
Gummy bears are partly made from roadkill, but that's for another time.
They also make you poop. That's also a different conversation.
Everyone knows that these are junk foods, so maybe you wouldn't be too surprised to see that the ingredients include a lot of poisons, including a harmful yellow dye called tatrazine, or yellow dye number 5. What you may not know is that this dye was originally made out of the sludge that's left over when you turn coal into coke for blast furnaces. It's called coal tar, and I've actually sued many big industries for legacy contamination of coal tar all around the country because it's so toxic and it's so harmful to the environment and human beings. A century ago, it was just an obnoxious industrial byproduct that everybody was trying to figure out ways to get rid of. One of the ways that they did that was by paving roads. But then a British chemist figured out that the coal tar could be used to derive fabric dye. And if fabric dye, why not food? Food manufacturers began using it to cover up the discoloration of low quality foods that they wanted to pass off on unsuspecting customers. They didn't know back then that this yellow dye, tartrazine, causes tumors, asthma, developmental delays, neurological damage, ADD, ADHD, hormone disruption, gene damage, anxiety, depression, intestinal injuries. Well, we know it now. We've known this for decades. That's why tartrazine is heavily restricted in other countries. In some countries, foods with tartrazine have a warning label that it may cause ADHD in children. Today, it's made from petroleum, not coal tar. Either way, it's crazy to add this to your kids' favorite foods. It doesn't even change the flavor. This yellow dye isn't just in junk food. It's in the foods that we consider healthy. It's in everyday kids' snacks like popcorn, mac and cheese, fruit snacks. It's in sports drinks like Gatorade and so-called vitamin water. It's even added to chicken broth, to corn, to pickles, to mustard, and to yogurt. And so, of course, our kids get sick. And we lovingly feed them chewable vitamins, which have, surprise, tartrazine. And so the cycle continues until the coughs and asthma kick in, at which point you go to pick up some cough syrup. And yeah, you guessed it, tartrazine. I've been picking on tartrazine today, but that's just one of at least 100 chemical poisons that our health agencies allow into our children's food. I can make a video just like this to talk about Red 40, BHA, BHD, potassium bromate, chemical after chemical, and on and on and on. If just one of them can cause all of these problems, imagine what they're doing in combination. That has never been studied. If we took all of these chemicals out, our nation would get healthier immediately. We'd have fewer sick days. We'd have better focus. We'd have less anxiety. Our kids would learn more easily. We'd lose weight. We'd have more energy. We'd have fewer tumors and longer lives. It's not all dark. Over the past 16 years, the government has banned 8 chemical additives that cause cancer, genetic damage, asthma, and many of the other health conditions, as tartrazine does. And you know what's interesting? All 8 of those crucial steps forward in our kids' health were taken under President Trump. But the Democrats who claim to be all about healthcare have stood by watching other countries ban these poisons and make our kids sick, asthmatic, hyperactive, and depressed. They left them on every supermarket shelf in America. They even used your tax money to put them in your kids' school lunch. So their big food and their big ag donors probably gave them all that golden handshake and the big money hug. And their big pharma donors probably called them up and thanked them also, because now they're going to make billions selling Adderall, Prozac, and rescue inhalers. Enough is enough. President Trump and I are going to stop the mass poisoning of American children. Together, we're going to make America healthy again.
Well, Ted.
That's a compelling
So
video. I mean, we've talked about this, and I'm going to repeat it again. You travel to other countries. I always mention Europe because Americans travel to, if they go overseas, they're more likely to go to Europe than anywhere else. And the EU has consistent food safety standards. They're not perfect, but they're much, much better than ours. Right. And these kinds of substances aren't permitted there. And when you go to Europe for any length of time, let's say a week or more, you will find that, if you're not, you don't go on any diet, you eat rich food, right? Do whatever you want, you drink alcohol, you're going to come back feeling healthier. You're going to breathe better. I have asthma. It's like you breathe better. You're just feel better, more energy, and you might lose a few pounds, more likely than not. If you go for a month, you really will lose some weight, even if you eat as much as you want. I love Italian food. When I was in Italy, I lost weight and I was there for a month. I mean, I love pasta, and I was losing weight on pasta. So I think, he's right about this, and it's a massive problem. And if the incoming Trump administration is serious about this, and they don't need congressional approval to make these changes, they can just do it. If they do that, it will save tens of millions of American lives. It would be absolutely revolutionary. I don't know if they would ever get credit for it, but God, please,
God, please
do this.
Like, I'm all on board with this pitch. I don't know how true it's going to prove to be, but as far as the mission, I'm so on board this mission. Like, and this is coming from somebody, like, I'm not a junk food junkie. I generally eat pretty good. And serving size wise, like, I love Doritos. Like, anyone that knows me knows I love chips, but I'm also not somebody that sits there and eats the entire bag in one sitting. You know what I mean? I have a few and it kind of hits the spot and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm fine. And I move on. But if we can do this, most people are not me. That's the problem. Most people don't have the same self-control. And it's not even, I shouldn't even.
And maybe the same, and maybe the same, or maybe the same metabolism.
And that too. And I shouldn't even chalk it up to self-control because I'm not actively telling myself no more. It's just my natural, once I'm satiated, I'm fine. I'm just totally fine. I get the craving out and I'm fine. But the problem is all of these foods are actually cheaper than the good healthy stuff, Ted.
Yeah.
It's more accessible. It is shelf stable. America has food deserts. The FDA needs to address that portion as well, because they have to approve having grocery stores, put in or whatever. The Food and Drug Administration needs to approve that, they give your store a stamp of approval. We need more actual grocery stores in places that have food deserts. And believe it or not, and I know a lot of people are going to say this social issue or whatever and bring up, oh, it's the hood. But a lot of the reason that places like, let's say, Southeast DC, that quadrant, right? There's a lot of food deserts there because it's, known as kind of the hood. And there's some robbing and looting that happens, Ted.
Yeah.
So, small grocers don't want to be there. It's not safe. And even big grocers have left. The government really needs to look into making real food accessible to communities like that. If you are really trying to impact, especially communities of color that tend to be lower income, have food deserts, and have the shortest life expectancy and the most chronic disease. That's something that they need to actually look at, not only removing the stuff from the food, like the foods in Europe, because they don't have all of this junk, but actually addressing the food that these people can access, or all people can access. We need access to better food so they can make better
no question.
decisions.
And, obviously this is a topic that could go on for many hours. There's one thing I noticed, as you know, I like to travel to Central Asia. What people might not know is, for example, the apple comes from Kazakhstan. That's where apples are from.
That's where, really?
And in fact, Alma Ata, which is what the name of the city was, the capital of the Kazakh SSR during the Soviet period, now called Almaty. But Alma means apple, as any girl named Alma knows.
I never knew that.
So Alma anyway, when you go to Central Asia and you eat apples, they're very small. They're like less than half the size. They're like the size of like a plum. They're like,
no kidding.
They're kind of like uneven, and the taste will absolutely blow you away. You've never really had, even if you go to an orchard apple, like a heirloom apple in the U.S., like from a farm stand, it'll be good. It won't be like the cardboard that you get from the perfect apple at the supermarket, but it's not that great. It's still an apple. An American apple is basically cardboard.
There's no flavor to any of them.
No flavor. And in fact, you can basically breed an apple to either have taste or appearance. And obviously we know what American stores have chosen. They go for the appearance. In fact, there's even a supermarket that I used to go to where they had a table for ugly fruit, or ugly apples, they called them. And but the ugly ones taste better. So, I don't know about you. I would rather eat something ugly that tastes good than something that looks great and tastes bad. But that's not the decision we're making. Those, like, we should have those kinds of breeding decisions put into federal regulations, where it's like, you can't breed out all the nutrients and the taste out of fruit.
So they're big and plump and beautiful, like our chickens.
And
like the Costco chickens.
And let me tell you, you also would be doing grocery chains like Albertsons a favor, because the problem for them is, like, imagine like you're the CEO of Albertsons or Kroger's and you want to do the right thing. Like, you care about your consumers, but you can't, because if you start putting gross, ugly looking sketchy looking apples out, they're not going to sell. You're going to lose that market share.
Let's say Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's.
They'll go somewhere else, right? So they have to compete. And so this is where federal regulation can really help, by setting a standard that says, like, no, nobody gets to have the pretty apple. Like that's not like allowed. So you're all on the same playing field. And, you know, there's a lot of industries that really want regulation that way. For example, big tech wants federal regulation on AI because they think AI is dangerous and they want guidelines, but they don't want to have to compete against people who aren't following guidelines.
Right.
So they want the guidelines set. It's maybe it's a little counterintuitive. But
and the source of that, Ted, don't forget, are big chem companies like Monsanto or Bayer or whatever, who control the seed, that they control the production at this point. So farmers are forced to use their like
copyrighted and trademarked
Frankenseed and for it to, and they're forced into it.
And then they have to buy, and those same companies sell them pesticides that only their pesticides will work to protect their patented seeds.
It's like the iPhone, right? Like you have to buy well, not anymore, but back then, before, like Apple products only work with Apple products, right?
Right.
So
you
can't buy interchangeable parts. It's the same thing.
It's like, I'm your pusher, baby. Yeah, it's like, here, let me give you a free sample. You love this.
There's
it's
so
like that.
much freaking reform to be had, and I really actually do hope that of all the people that could or won't get, Senate approval, I fear he won't be one of them, but I really hope that he would be one of them, because like the food stuff is one of my major concerns, both for myself and for, obviously I have a young family. But, and also, can I just point out, if you look at his microphone, I've been bothered by his microphone the whole 5 minutes of this video. What's wrong with it? You see the wire coming straight down and it's clipped on? Yeah. That's wrong. The wire should be looped into a little U and clipped behind his lapel so the wire is hidden. That's really unprofessional. Whoever did that.
That's true.
I'm just saying.
You're right. You're right. Well, that's a Cheryl situation.
I don't know. I'm not going to blame Cheryl because I don't know if she was there for the filming of this.
Well, it could have been that chick from New York Magazine.
Oh God, no. Oh. Not even as cute as Cheryl, who's twice.
Oh, definitely not as cute as Cheryl.
The New York Magazine chick is literally half Cheryl's age, and Cheryl is smoking.
However, it's interesting, right? Because this is a cute versus sexy thing, and we've really got to wrap this up because we're so long.
Yeah.
But Cheryl is much cuter, but the New York Magazine lady is hot. You know, she's sexy. No, things get dirty there.
Pretty. Cheryl's a very
she's prettier than the but they're sexy and then there's cute, and they're not always in the same package. They can be, but
maybe
not always.
Because I'm a straight woman, so I just look
Come on, what about prettier guys? Aren't there guys who are like
the bad boy?
The guy's handsome, but maybe there's like no spark, versus like a guy who might like have unconventional looks, but is like,
he makes you laugh. Or something.
Well, it's more than, or he's just got that certain.
For us,
no.
For us, it's for us. For you guys see the crazy hot scale, and you guys are like, oh, we know what that means. I can't see that because I'm a straight cis woman or whatever they identify me as these days. But I know, in terms of dating, like men, I've gone out with men that were, less than conventional attractive, and because they were either brilliant or they made me laugh, or they, women, we like being stimulated here before we're stimulated down there.
Right. That's what they say.
Just saying.
So
that's all I'm going to say.
By the way, speaking of this sort of thing, if you have a question for Manila and I, and you want us to talk about your question, you should record your question in a sound clip no longer than 2 minutes, and you should send it as a file attachment to the following email address: TMI Show question at yahoo.com. That's TMI Show question at yahoo.com. And we will discuss it later in the week.
Yeah, we'll make you a part of the show. If you are not shy, we will play your video.
People are shy. I don't know why they're not sending them in.
They are.
They should. All right.
Because I get tweeted at all the time. Like, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Or listen, And I'm
Come
like,
on, and we're nice. We're not going to humiliate you. We're going to be serious. We're going to actually engage with your question. I mean, unless your question's
gonna-
really dumb, then we're going to totally make fun of you. But you know,
well, there could be
there are stupid questions, and there are stupid people.
But I will
No,
say
I'm
that
kidding. We'll be nice.
we will be like your BFF that will tell you the absolute truth, because
Yeah.
even your BFF won't tell you.
Yep.
I'm just saying. So if
TMI
it's
Show
like
question at Yahoo.
TMI Show question singular at yahoo.com.
We should put it up in
Send
a
us-
banner at some point so that people can.
That's a good idea. I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay,
Send us
cool.
the question so you can be a part of the show. We want to introduce like a weekly Friday segment where you're a part of the show and
Mhm.
we'll address whatever question it is.
It could be
we'll
about
play-
politics, the news, finance,
dating,
pet
whatever.
care. I personally would love romance and dating questions.
I would love those.
Yeah.
I would love those. I flirted with the idea of writing a cheeky like coffee
Ethics.
table book about dating.
Politeness, courtesy,
Oh, ooh, could be that. Could be that. Could be anything. Send us
landlord-tenant
a question.
relations.
I
What
was a
cities are better
realtor.
to live? What cities are better to live in? What travel
Be part of the
advice?
show.
We travel a lot.
We have traveled a lot. All right.
Mhm.
That's going to do it for us. We went over. I hope you guys enjoyed this new like segment. I think Ted and I want to do this occasionally where we poke around, where I ambush Ted with various social media posts and see what he says, cuz sometimes, social media has good stuff.
And we
Because
could do it. We
mainstream-
could do it the other way around. I'm sure we could figure out logistics.
you could, yeah, you're going to have to find like
I
well,
can
no,
do
cuz
that.
then it won't be a surprise because I'm the one clicking the buttons.
No, I'll just give you the links, and you just don't click the links.
I have to promise
You
not
have
to
to
look at
promise
the
not
link.
to look at the links. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I can do that.
Okay. Cool.
All right. That's going to do it for us. So thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure if you are watching on YouTube that you guys just hit the subscribe button. That is free. And the like button on there, of course, if you're watching on Rumble. Please do also follow the show, hit the thumbs up, smash that thumbs up button. And if you are in the position to do so, we would greatly appreciate if you become a $5 monthly subscriber. So that way we can keep doing this show for you if you find value in what it is we are bringing to you daily, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. So with that, we will leave that right there and see you all tomorrow. We appreciate you being here. Today was kind of like a fun, like Manila and Ted really digging into everything. And we're
We
going to
gotta
have
go
guests.
short. I want to see if we can do one of these under 60 minutes. I really do.
We'll get
We're
there.
supposed to.
We have. We've done it. We've done it.
Very
We've done it.
little.
All
Very
right.
little.
Very small, very little. Okay, that'll do it for us. Thank you all. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Adios, amigos.
Mañana.